Hey, hi everyone. I'm just streaming to Facebook. Happy National Diabetes Awareness Month. That is truly the theme. Seeing as we're having two brown bags this month, it's a special occasion. So we are welcoming four people for the first time, a panel onto the brown bag. So this is the caregivers and loved ones point of view. So um, just a little recap for DPAC. Our mission is to ensure quality of and access to care, medications, and devices for people living with diabetes. We educate lawmakers on the needs of people with diabetes, and we help our patient advocates on how to frame their story to best be effective and affect policy change for people with diabetes. There are social media channels on the bottom. I'm sure you probably know them if you got here already. So here are our four panelists. So Joe Quickle is a data analytics and leadership professional with a passion for uncovering insights and trends. In his spare time, he dabbles in voice acting and podcasting, bringing stories and discussions to life. He has been heavily involved in diabetes advocacy since meeting his wife, Megan, almost 20 years ago. Um, Kyle is the only person actually on our panel who has diabetes himself as well. So Kyle is first and foremost an advocate focused on raising the voice of people with diabetes, increasing awareness, and by expanding access to care. His experience includes mission-inspired startups as well as NGOs, and he has influenced diabetes care on a global scale. He has lived with type 1 diabetes for more than 27 years and supported his mother with her diabetes as a part-time caregiver following a turbulent misdiagnosis. Um, Wilhelmina Ross is a dedicated mother and passionate caregiver to Skylar Ross, who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 2 years ago. Wilhelmina has taken on the roles of both caregiver and advocate to aid in learning and managing the condition. Wilhelmina is an epidemiologist who works in the public health sector. And Kaylee, I have to pull up her bio because she texted it to me. Kaylee Callahan is a career little sister to a big sister with type 1 diabetes and a big brother with no notable characteristics. She has spent the last 30 years perfecting the art and science of being the youngest child. However, her dedication to her craft went from love of the game to necessity upon learning the seriousness of type 1 diabetes at the ripe age of 25 years old, startled at the realization that T1D wasn't something that everybody's sister lived with, and certainly not easily. Since she has taken it upon herself to make her sister's lifelong diagnosis about her as much as she can, and never misses an opportunity to remind her sister that T1D is really serious, actually. Kaylee works a boring finance job, but in her free time, she can be found at the barn riding horses on her couch with her husband and cats playing video games. She is not like the other girls. Thank you for that, Kaylee. So let's get started with our questions. So let me stop sharing so you can see our panel's beautiful faces. So Happy and Dan, share your relationship to the person with diabetes in your life and give us a short glimpse into your journey with them. And you guys can start with whoever.
Okay, I'll go. All right. Okay, so as Amanda said in my bio, Megan has put up with me for about 20 years now, and we've been through many adventures together during that time, whether it's traveling or just staying home. We did discover that both of us are very much Disney people, so we go to those places a lot more frequently than I would have ever thought in my life.
And hi, yes, I have been with Skylar her whole life, but she's had type 1 diabetes for 2 years. She was diagnosed at 8 and now she's 10. And we are, of course, because she was diagnosed at a young age, a lot of it was on me as her mom to help her manage and to learn how to manage it, the diagnosis. And now we are helping her learn how to manage the diabetes herself. And we are still kind of like overarching and maybe giving her a break, you know, in the evenings sometimes, but definitely it's been a team sport on our end.
I can go next. So Kyle Rose, I've been living with type 1 diabetes since I was a teenager. But today I'm going to be talking about my relationship with my mother and support for her with her diabetes. She was misdiagnosed, as was mentioned in the introductory remarks. Essentially, it was a misdiagnosis, and then it was a misdiagnosis. And then at 82 years old, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And that's something I've been supporting her with for the last year and a half to 2 years.
So my relationship with diabetes is that my big sister, Erin Callahan, has it. Yeah, it was very, she's 14 years older than me or 13 years older than me or something. And it was very normalized in our house where it was just like, oh yeah, Sissy has this thing. And it wasn't in my bio. I cheekily said I didn't learn it was serious until 25, but like I really seriously did not learn that it was serious until I was 25, which is humiliating, but also it did kind of like it propelled me to care a lot more about it, because it was just this thing that she had and dealt with, and that's all I really knew about it until I actually decided to learn more. And since then, I've been pretty invested in her well-being and just generally like advocacy and diabetes awareness, because if I was living with somebody with diabetes and I didn't know how serious it was, like it, people just don't know. So yeah.
Thank you. So what are each of your main responsibilities as a caregiver to a person with diabetes? And caregiver in this sense is used loosely. You don't have to be literally the person taking care of them night and day, but someone who cares for someone with diabetes.
Okay, I'll go first again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, with the loose terminology, I honestly, I really consider myself more of a partner in care than a caregiver. And really, I just want to help whenever, wherever I'm needed.
Yeah, I think for me, I take on a very like sort of unusual role as caretaker. I know that we're using it as a pretty broad term here, but I would agree that anybody that cares about somebody with diabetes is giving care to them in some capacity. So, you know, it kind of came on by choice in a sense. So again, once I really like grew up and learned more about it, it was like I wanted to help in any way that I could. And I quickly realized that there were a ton of ways that somebody can help a person with diabetes that they care about, even if they're not their mom or their spouse or whatever. Like it doesn't, you don't have to be glued to them all the time to be a caregiver. And so that's kind of how my role came to be.
Yeah, I know Kyle and Wilhelmina, you both, I think Kyle, you are the son of someone with diabetes, and Wilhelmina, you are the mother of someone with diabetes. So those caregiver dynamics are kind of, I mean, I'm sure they're similar, but you know, reversed in a bit. So how does that work?
I know for me, like I said, when Skylar was first diagnosed, it was really like my diagnosis. I had to understand the disorder. I had to understand how to manage it. I had to understand what to do, and it was overwhelming. At first, I contemplated, do I leave work? Um, I tried to jump into communities to better just figure out what supports I need and all of those things. And Skylar was more so like, oh, this happened. I didn't feel well, went to the doctor, I feel better now, and I take shots. I mean, I think for her, it was more, she knew she needed to take injections, but that was her lift, is getting used to taking shots. Um, Slowly, she did start the learning process though, so I started not really offsetting some of the responsibilities to her, but I did start to train her just little by little. So she went to diabetes camp her first year in. And that was really for her to connect with a community of people who dealt with something similar, so she could Skylar is the only person in our home that has diabetes. And so it was important for me to try to infuse her into a community of people who really understood what she was going through. And then we also did like some groups that were local. So I could connect with parents who understood what I was going through. And that was, I think, if I had to think about like the training and all of the things that I dealt with diabetes, though that is one of the top experiences that I would note as a caregiver, that I was able to connect with other caregivers and they understood what I was going through, and they were there to say, don't quit your job, it gets better. Things like that. Because I think as a caregiver, especially if you're a caregiver of a child or a young child, you're almost in crisis mode when the diagnosis happens. And we didn't go into DKA, but my kid is no longer like perfect health, right? And this is chronic, so it's not going away. And so it was a lot of emotions and a lot of management and just getting used. Like I tell the joke, it's actually reality, but it's a little humor that my kid took an hour to eat every time. We had to reheat the food because I had to learn to count the carbs. And now we're on the pump, so it does get better. But I think when you're at ground zero, you think that this is life as we know it. And you're not looking like, okay, this is going to get easier. This is going to get more manageable. And I can keep doing the things that we've been doing. I just have to learn how to infuse this into our new day to day.
Yeah, for me, it was obviously a bizarre dynamic to have the roles reversed. 30 years after the fact, my mother was instrumental in helping me when I was diagnosed as a teenager, and helped me through the worst days, right? The really bad lows, or whatever it may be. And I'm sure that was ingrained into her mind when she was diagnosed with type 1, unfortunately. And I think she also, though, has remembered how well I've been able to do and thrive with type 1 diabetes. And so I think that's a balancing act when you're diagnosed. In terms of the actual responsibilities, just to clarify, my father's the primary caregiver and is extremely involved and lives with my mother. But given my history with type 1, I'm pretty involved in doctor's appointments. And there's also this thing where they live in an extremely rural area. I'm in an urban area. I'm in Los Angeles. And so, in their case, they may need to drive 100 miles to get to the closest endocrinologist. So whereas I'm saying, well, we should be able to do this really easily and quickly, that's not always the case over there. And so I've been just also supporting, not only on the emotional side, but on a lot of the logistical and kind of medical system stuff as well.
I'm sure she appreciates that. That's totally like one of the main things that I think as a child to a parent you do in general, but especially when it comes to diabetes. One person asked in the Q&A, they said, I love this panel of sorts of family members, mother, sister, husband, son, which really emphasizes that diabetes, especially T1D, takes a family-centric approach. And they asked, what kinds of tools and support do you wish that you had when your family member was first diagnosed? And what would you tell families today that are new to living with a family member with T1D? I think Joe, you can go first. I think you actually answered it already in the chat.
Yeah, well, so this was going to go into my next answer. So
Okay.
I'll briefly touch on so the Dexcom apps and things like that that allow you to share across to somebody else to view things um, hugely lifts a burden.
Mhm.
There's not any of the if it's a low and minimum response, like you can't wake somebody up. You know, you don't have to actually sit there and prick somebody's finger to check their blood sugar for them. You can just use the app and go, okay, well, this is where it's at. This is where the trend is and things like that. But yeah, I'll get more into that in a minute.
And I want to say, I will piggyback off of Joe and say that Dexcom is amazing. We fortunately came home from the hospital with Dexcom. So we don't really know life without Dexcom. And it has definitely been a game changer for us. Skylar is a twin. So she has a twin sister named Taylor, and maybe we'll hear from Taylor later on in this segment, but Taylor also helps. Like I said, it is definitely a team sport in my household because when Skylar got diagnosed, we all got diagnosed. So we all changed. So it's not Skylar eats one thing and we eat another. It's not, oh, Skylar only counts carbs. Now we all are cautious of carbs. I mean, just because we know, like, who knew milk had that many carbs? Things like that, that we just didn't really realize before. We incorporate things, but to answer the question of things that I wish we had or things that you need to know newly diagnosed, I would say that everybody diagnosed should ask for a social worker. I think for me, coming out the gate, I'm also trained as a physician assistant, and I can tell you, like a social worker, they know how to connect you to resources. They know they can look overarchingly and say, oh, these resources are available, and it may sometimes be things that you didn't even think of. So I had my mind working, but also there's another person, and that's what they do. So we looked at, is there a food service that comes with the carbs already counted? Like just things that I was wondering, is that available? And turns out that's available. I mean, you have to have a high hemoglobin 1AC to get it, but it is available. And I think like they know certain resources that may be available. The other thing I would say, technology changed our life. I'll say that again, technology changed our life. We came home with Dexcom, but we didn't get on the insulin pump until a year later. So now my daughter puts in her carbs in the phone, and we're not doing calculations for carbs. All of those things help her live life on the go. So last year, she went on her first sleepover. And that might be a very normal thing for most kids, but to someone who has TD1, the caregiver is always worried they're not going to wake up in the middle of the night. So for me, I could see her blood sugars from my house, and I could know that she was okay at someone else's house. Or I could say, hey, to the parent, she needs a correction, and they could punch it into the phone. And that's not like they're trying to, dial it up in a syringe and stick your kid. And some people aren't as comfortable doing that. So it definitely brings more ease to non-caregivers, and they're more willing to say, okay, well, you can manage this from your wherever you are. We'll call you if there's a problem. The other thing that just stated is I thought that connecting to a support system was phenomenal. Like people who have walked this walk much longer than I have, I could just do the cheat line, right? And get all of their knowledge that they were willing to share and implement that from the beginning. And so I think for new parents, new caregivers, support system, accessing those communities, technology, and what was the other big one I said, Amanda? It was one other one. I think those three are like big. I forgot what was I said Dexcom, community, and there was one other. Oh, social worker.
Social worker. Yeah.
Social worker. That I would say those are the three.
Kyle, I think there was a question toward you in the chat. For Kyle, given your parents are rural, does their endo provider let them use virtual visits to make their lives easier?
Yeah, they do actually. So thank goodness, because it's a long drive and it's not always the best of roads. So I think 1 out of 2 visits is the rule. So they want to see her in person every 6 months, but the other visit can be over virtual health, telehealth, which saves them a trip.
Yeah, that sounds really convenient. I'm glad that they do that. Our next question is, you all have very different relationships and dynamics with the person with diabetes in your life. I mentioned this earlier, but caregiver, although it sounds very official, we just mean caregiver as anyone who cares for someone with diabetes. And this is something that looks different person to person. So in your capacity as a caregiver, how have you figured out exactly what is needed from you? And what kind of conversations have you had? And then what other things have you just picked up on, like without any conversation needed?
I think for me, again, being in this sort of like unusual type of caregiver role, like seems kind of like we all are, but a little bit. Of course, everybody's different, but yeah, my sister is 44, I think, and I'm 30, and she had lived with diabetes since she was 9, and so when I started to become more, I guess, invested in her care and things like that, really, it, we had to kind of have like a good amount of conversations about it. Like when she first got her Dexcom, and I started following her, I was the only person really that had access to it because we felt like giving our parents access to it was probably not going to be the best scenario for an adult child in their 40s. So I was kind of like the next best thing to sort of like look after it. But it was interesting because I would get a notification about a low, and I would immediately text her, like freaking out, being like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Answer me." And then if she didn't answer, I'd flip, and she had to be like, "Kaylee, I have had diabetes for longer than you have been alive, and I am still alive. So, like, I appreciate this, but it is indeed too much." And so we kind of just had that conversation and came up with like a system, which was that if I get a low notification, I let 30 minutes go by. If I'm still getting those notifications, then I reach out and we go from there. But it really was this sort of like interesting dynamic because I never asked questions. I never thought about it. I mean, I was the younger one and she was taking care of me very often. And so stepping into this kind of role was interesting, and it just required conversation and collaboration on what was comfortable for her, what was comfortable for me, because I started to have more visibility that I never did, which did put more anxieties on me just because it's like I have this transparency. And before I was like, blissfully ignorant. And now I'm like, oh my God, you're like this all day long. And she's like, yeah, that's been my life. Like, so and so it's really just a lot of like conversation, collaboration, and listening to them and what they need, especially when you are dealing with somebody that is like a full blown adult. You know, I don't have any sway over her. Wilhelmina, you're in a totally different position. You're the mom. But like, I can't really like totally enforce stuff with my sister. I can just kind of be there and listen and start to pick up on things here and there, and ask questions that are, you know, relevant. And it's like, if I'm like, are you low right now? Or are you just like being stupid? Like, sometimes she's like, I'm fine. And then you drop it. You don't bug her more. So it's a lot of collaboration.
You know, Callie, I just want to just chime in on something you said. I can attest that as Skylar is getting more independent and she's starting to be more aware, and we're integrating her more into her care, she definitely has had those moments where she's like, Mom, back off. Like, this is me and I'm trying to take ownership. So, and also having that mother-daughter dynamic, and sister dynamic. Sky Taylor is definitely her twin, and like she's like, are you okay? And sometimes Sky was like, back up a little, I got this. And so I even had to tell the school recently, and we implement this and it's hard, but we give her time to come up if she's experiencing a low. So we have thresholds. And so I actually set my thresholds a little lower than her thresholds, and my highs a little higher than her highs. So she has time to react to the high or the low without everybody swarming her and pulling out walkie-talkies like, is the child okay? So yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at on things. Like we with the apps set different levels. Um, but like my answer to the question is just kind of partially answered in the previous one. But Megan's really good about saying what she needs and knowing what she needs. She's had diabetes for a long time. And but like my experience with it has evolved quite a bit over time with technology. So I'll just touch on lows for this. So lows in the middle of the night used to be just Megan, smacking me in the arm or something, and then because she can't really say a lot when she's low or it's really quiet. And I used to sleep really heavily. She probably says I still sleep really heavily, but now with technology, we have the glow coasters, which we have two of them. One of them is in the bedroom. One is actually right there in my office. And so those things flash pretty brightly in the middle of the night. And then between that and her pump and phone going off like an air raid siren, I can pretty quickly know what's going on. I get up and get juice, and we're all good.
Mm-hmm. I want to say, like, for caregivers, because I think that we don't say this enough. Um, it's okay to give yourself rest as well. And that is something that I'm learning this year. Now that we're 2 years in, we hit the 2-year mark. My kid is still alive. She's still thriving. And so now I don't know if this is popular or unpopular, but I actually turned a lot of the alarms off. I understand we cannot turn the low alarm off, so that's great. So I know my kid is going to make it through the night. So we still have that alarm on. But there are some the high alarms we check before she goes to bed. And we see that I try to get her in normal range, especially if she just had dinner. But I realized, like, I need rest too. And if her alarm is going off every 20 minutes through the night, I was a crazy person for a while because I was really trying to have tight management. And so, and I did, it was talking to another parent that told me, we have to make our goals fit into our lives. And so I was like, yeah, she has tight management for this period of time, but at what cost? And so understanding that I needed sleep, like I needed a night of like uninterrupted sleep so I could function. Now we turn off a lot of the alarms at night. We check before she goes. I understand that if she hits low, that it will alarm, and that made me feel more safe. And understanding the technology that we're using, that is a ongoing battle for us, but understanding, the pump also wants her to not go low, so it turns off the insulin when she hits a certain, and so she will start to rise. So things like that we've implemented recently.
Oh my goodness, that I think that resonates in a huge way with me. And absolutely, you need to take care of yourself so you can take care of someone else, right? I mean, caregiver burnout exists, and I've learned that. And I think I've learned as a person living with type 1 how difficult it is to be in the role of trying to help, support, take care, whatever the words we're going to use, of someone else. And I have incredible respect for it. In fact, I think it's harder. I really do. I think it's more challenging because with me and my own type 1, I know that I've treated my low, I'm waiting, and it's going to get better. And of course, that comes with time and maturity. But my parents or my brother or whoever it may be, my wife, she doesn't know if I've treated yet, right? And she sees those same alarms and numbers that you've been referring to. And so I do think that finding that dynamic, and what you alluded to, Kaylee, of trying to find the right balance of, do I say something? Do I not? I mean, that's really challenging. And it sounds like you guys have found a good way to do it. There's something also that exists that's called alarm fatigue, that those that live with type 1 experience. They say there's something like 200 decisions a day that are related to diabetes, whether what you're going to eat, how you're going to choose to do something, respond to a piece of technology. And there's all these alarms, right, that are well-intended alarms. And I think that applies probably to you all as well, if those alarms are ringing. I'm interested to hear from you, Joe, what the GLOGOS is, because I don't think I've seen that before. But thank you for sharing. And just to say a huge respect for the roles that you play in your family members with type 1 and diabetes.
Yeah, briefly, Kyle, the glucose. So it was just something that I think they did on Kickstarter to start with, and it logs into a stream from Dexcom using a trusted pair connection, and so you set thresholds, and when it's right in range, it's green. When it starts going low, it's yellow. When it's low, it's red. When it's very low, it's red and flashing. And then highs are other like colors, blues and purples and things like that. So it's really neat. Nice visual representation.
Thank you. This is really shedding light for me on how different the dynamics can be, because I'm also realizing, of all of us on this panel, Wilhelmina is like the only one who has like direct control over the person with diabetes. And so it's like very interesting that everyone else has to kind of like, walk on a tightrope a little bit. But and then Wilhelmina, you're also talking about how as Skylar gets older, you're also backing off a little. So that's really interesting. And I also, as someone who has diabetes, and thank you, Kyle, for bringing this up, the alarm fatigue, that also really plays into when I use Dexcom Follow as well. And I feel super uncomfortable giving my Dexcom Follow to people, not because I'm uncomfortable with them seeing my numbers, but because I feel bad, because it's like, I'm going to go low a lot and I'm going to go high a lot. And you don't really know which ones are serious or not. But then you are over here doing these mental calculations, being like, oh, I guess I shouldn't contact her before she goes to this number. And then I shouldn't. And then I'm like taking on the mental stress of another person, my loved one. And it just ends up compounding. And I know everyone with diabetes is different, but that's just another layer of potential stress from sharing all this with your loved ones. And my next question is, how has your relationship with the person with diabetes in your life evolved with time? And do you have any challenging or even funny moments to share?
Yeah, I mean, just my knowledge has evolved with it over time. So I have to ask less questions about things. Um, but so just kind of a funny moment. And I got pre-cleared to share this. Was so before I could really get the answer myself through using that Dexcom View app, I have asked a few times in the past if she was just really mad at me or if she was having a high. And so anyway, usually
It's kind
she
of like, yeah.
her response when I talked to her about this said, "No, I'm just mad at you." But
Yeah, I think our one of our board members, Jake Johnson, shared that he and his partner, like, he allows his partner to be like, can you check your blood sugar for me right now? Like in a way, like implying like, are you okay? And then he'll do this in front of her and be like, oh, I guess I'm just angry at you, you know? So I thought that was kind of funny. And it's kind of it's a hard thing to ask because it's kind of like, the stereotype of asking a girl, like, are you on your period right now? Like, and so you don't really want to do that.
So I can say for this, I think the youngest type 1 diabetic on the call, it's definitely dynamic. Changes have been happening, and ones that we figured out, ones we're in process of figuring out, and ones we still don't know what's going on. So I am learning that sometimes when she's high and she doesn't know she's high, she's cranky. I didn't know that before. And I was like, where is this attitude coming from? She's also hormonally changing, but not yet. So we're experiencing a little bit of resistance for no reason at all. And as she becomes more independent and just with age, she's taking more ownership and she's understanding more and she wants more independence. So I think our relationship is constantly changing, from me being into, oh my God, this is my burden to bear, to me sharing the burden, to it being her burden, right? So we are definitely walking through that continuum, and it's dynamic. It is changing every day. And also with her sister, knowing when to like jump in and be sisterly and give support and knowing when to back off. Her sister does some really cute things for her, like, oh, I'll take a finger stick, if you don't feel like it. And or when she has meltdowns, like, nobody understands what I'm going through, just trying to show that twin love that I can't touch as a mom even. But I think that our relationship is definitely changing and will continue to change as she gets older, and knows more and can do more, and wants to take this on all by herself and wants us to back up and just be mom and sister.
Yeah, actually, I want to show a video real quick of Taylor, Skylar's twin sister, because Wilhelmina shared it with me right before this call. Can you see this?
Yes. You can't hear it though.
Oh, let me see if this is better.
Hello, my name is Taylor, and I'm here to talk about how I'm a caregiver for my sister with diabetes. Before she got diagnosed, I went first and got a finger stick, which I think her to go second and get hers. One way I advocate for my sister is one time at school, someone came up to me and said, "You have a snack that's not fair." So then I so she needs that snack to keep her blood sugar managed. And I think my voice helped because sometimes I hear my sister say someone feels that I sound like that. What do you feel?
Were you able to hear that?
A little, we could hear.
Okay.
A little, make it out, but yeah, she I can tell you, and I think Kaylee can also understand this. She really loves to advocate for her sister, and that is a way that she shows up, and the advocate, she'll have advocacy at school if she needs to. The story she was talking about, someone, oh, we can't have snacks, and she was like, oh no, she needs that snack, she's okay, like it's for her blood sugar. And sometimes she can be Skylar's voice when Skylar can't find her voice herself. And I see her do that a lot. And that makes me feel good as a mom, but also it's good to know that she has someone at a young age to help her walk through this life and advocate for the things that she needs to advocate for, even when she's not up to the challenge. So I really love the way she feels like this is the way I can help. And so she tries to find those ways, and she tries to show up, and she tries to, be that person that, no, I don't have diabetes, but I love someone with diabetes, and this is why we need change.
I love the fact that you use the word advocate, because I think there's no better word. And the classic example for me living with type 1 was I'm low and I'm getting to the point where I'm low, I'm in a public space and I'm feeling vulnerable and don't know what to ask for, don't want to like step in front of the line because I don't want to upset people, don't want to just open up a random orange juice at a grocery store, wherever the situation may be, and just having someone next to being like, no, this is my friend, he has a medical need, he needs that orange juice served right now. And then in other forms more pertaining to my mother, it's been advocating for technology. We talked about technology when she was diagnosed. The physician at the hospital didn't want to prescribe a CGM. It was a long discussion. Took several months of work, and for whatever reason, that person didn't want to support that technology. For me, answering the question about technology, that's been the real game changer, both for myself and my mother in terms of treatment. But yeah, boy, can advocating feel good. Even if when I was a teenager, I was maybe a little resentful and embarrassed sometimes of my parents. It all came from a place of love, I know.
Yeah, definitely. I saw one in the comments. I know we are all the person with diabetes in our lives is all type 1 coincidentally in this call, but they're asking, I keep seeing a lot of doctors now, they're saying that type 2 diabetes can be treated without medication, but just diet. If you are not yet on medication, should we try that first? I also heard that people come off of medication due to weight loss and diet. Have any of you experienced this with the person you care for? I do want to say that type 2 diabetes definitely varies from person to person. Some people have managed it just with diet, some people with oral medication, some people with insulin. It really varies from person to person. And that's also similar to kind of on the same note of what Kyle was just saying, is that you know your body the best and you kind of have to advocate for the type of treatment that you want. But does anyone here happen to have any experience with anyone with type 2 in their lives? If not, we can contact this person separately.
Yeah, I will say that type 2 does run in my family, and I do understand that the diet is very important for type 2. And I've heard for some of the newer medications on the market are popular. I don't think they're that new, but I think they're more popular recently. I think that they can lower the need for insulin, or also cause a lot of weight loss, which also lowers the need for insulin. And some weight loss can also, in some people, reduce the need for reduce insulin resistance. I'm sorry. So I think that both weight loss and lower needs for insulin can sometimes help out people who have I'm sorry, diet modification and weight loss can sometimes help out like the insulin resistance that some experience with type 2. But I agree with Amanda. I think that it's different for everyone, and any road that you travel, it should be under the care of a provider who knows your case and understands well and can follow you along the journey.
Thank you. That was really well said. What have you learned about the lived experience of diabetes that you never considered or understood before being in the position of a caregiver? And I know, Kyle, you yourself have diabetes. So for you, kind of different question, is there a certain perspective on diabetes that you gained only through your experience as a caregiver? I know you said that you felt like that was a little bit harder than just having diabetes yourself.
Yeah, I can kick things off. I mean, I've been blown away, quite frankly, at how difficult it is. And my mother's a very capable and learned individual, but this is an extremely challenging thing to learn. I think no matter what age you learn, you have to adapt in life, but maybe even particularly so when you have, 82 years of habits that have formed. So yeah, I know I get emotional answering that question because it's been really, really hard. And I have a whole new respect for people that are, supporting individuals living with diabetes. I think it's our relationship is I think strained because I'm still trying to find that dynamic, how to support her. And Yeah, but I've really, I think, learned how incredibly difficult it is for those around us, and how to find those right boundaries without stepping over them, which you undoubtedly have to do sometimes, maybe for safety reasons. Mm.
Yeah, I think also that touches on a question someone asked in the Q&A a lot earlier, which was, as a person with diabetes, I worry that my diabetes and complications are a burden on my loved ones. And ultimately, they asked, can the panelists, the fact that you carry that load as a caregiver of someone with diabetes. But yeah, sorry, please continue with the
I wanted to say with Kyle, I have talked to a couple of other caregivers, and I think that this is just a very reoccurring among virtually every caregiver I've spoken to, and that's preserving the relationship beyond diabetes. I think that that is important. And I think that as caregivers, we want this person to be healthy and we want to help out. And we, see like the scientific nature of this, and we're just like, oh my God, we have to step in and help with control. And it is a balance, and it is a different balance for everyone. But I hear this among a lot of caregivers, like trying to preserve the relationship because it can become strained real quick between, virtually any relationship. So I think that this is something that we can dive in deeper at a later date, but I know that it is a conversation that needs to be continued because it is definitely affecting many caregivers.
So, briefly, some of the things that I learned really was that I'd never really thought about before, not being exposed to diabetes in general, let alone type 1, was that how much your blood sugar levels can really affect pretty much everything in your bodily health.
Yeah. It's also both in the short term and the long term. If you're riding high, you're riding low, or if you just had a hard day behind you, also it can still affect the way that you move through the world.
And some things that you implemented yesterday might not work today. That is what we're noticing now. We're noticing that like, oh, this was well controlled for 2 weeks, and now we don't know what's happening. So, and the body is, I like to say to anybody who's listening that the body is so amazing, but it's also very sophisticated. And so trying to mimic what the body does on its own can just be mind blowing sometimes. And technology, we just see like technology, while it is a game changer, I will always say that it is not the body itself. So there are things, if she gets sick, it's like we're pushing insulin for no apparent reason. You know, we don't even know she's sick yet because the symptoms didn't start. So it's just the changes that we go through with trying to regulate blood sugar has been really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, and I see somebody making a comment in the questions, it's hard being a pancreas. Yeah, isn't that the truth? I mean, it's the status quo of our current treatments with diabetes is pretty crazy. I think when we think about it, like at any given moment, we could have insulin and too much insulin on board, and we kind of have come to terms with the fact that means that we could be low and we would then need to treat. But when I went through that process, even though I do work in diabetes, by the way, for my mother, I realized how crazy that sounded. Like, yeah, mom, you might go low, but then you've got, you know, glucose tabs and stuff with you just in case. And I mean, that's not normal, right? And so I think sometimes it does some good to remind ourselves of that we can go through it and use all the tools and really thrive and do well. And a lot of us do, but it is pretty crazy when you think about it in those terms.
Kaylee, were you going to say something? Sorry, I saw you unmute yourself earlier.
Oh no, that's okay. I was going to speak more to the question about like carrying the load, the emotional load of like being a person with a caregiver of a person with diabetes. I cannot really speak to like the intricacies of what everybody is talking about. I'm probably the person that is like furthest away from my person with diabetes's like decisions about her insulin and the way that she approaches it. So it's I can't really like get into the weeds on that necessarily. But I guess I just wanted to touch on the speaking to the point on how we sort of carry the emotional load of being worried and, you know, trying to not like cross boundaries and being like respectful of another adult's autonomy over their body. And, you know, I think that for me, my sister and I are super, super close. So we talk a lot about everything. And I think that just having conversations that are really candid about like, I am feeling stressed about, you know, what my role might be in this. And like, I remember having that conversation with my sister before, like being like, this makes me scared all of the time. And kind of just talking that through, I think can do a lot of, can help a lot. And I think also for me, because my person with diabetes that I care about is an adult. So it is a lot of just like reminding myself that like, yes, this is like a grown adult woman who is like perfectly capable of making her own decisions and taking care of herself. And really my role is trying to just make her life easier, trying to make it easier for her to make those decisions to take care of herself, trying to stay out of the way, but then get involved when a hand is needed with whatever that looks like. And that probably like jumps into our next question, which is about how do you advocate for your person with
Thank you.
So,
Perfect.
yeah.
Since we're a little short on time, I'm going to combine our last two questions basically into one. As a caregiver, one of your responsibilities is to advocate for your loved one. Taylor talked about this a little bit in her video where she told another person at school that actually my sister can have that. And I'm sure all of your loved ones are very well versed in self-advocacy. But can you tell us about a situation where you had to advocate for them, and how did your voice help? And also, if you have any advice for other caregivers, especially those new to diabetes, feel free to sprinkle that in.
All right. So I try to handle all of the insurance stuff, any supply issues, anything like that, whether it's directly related to the insurance company themselves, because they're not um, having a certain insulin or drug or anything that she may need in their formulary. So we have to go through all that process. Um, or if it's calling, every pharmacy in a tri-state area to find a specific supply because there's a shortage. It's just one of those things that I put on myself, um, just so it's one or two or 10 or whatever less things that she doesn't have to think about in the already hundreds of things that she already deals with type 1. And so for the advice, I mean, sometimes you just have to roll with things and understand that you're not going to know it all up front, and there's going to be a lot of learning as you go.
Joe, that is really amazing that you do that. Like that is a really, really, really like fabulous show of love and care and support. I will not be doing that for my sister, but I think it's really great that you do it for your wife.
I will be recording this and sending it to whoever I end up marrying, and say, this is the example that you have to follow.
There was a question in the chat that I wanted to make sure we answered. And someone asked if we had participated in the ChildNet screening for the other sibling. And I just wanted to say we definitely did have a set of twins. So immediately as a mom, I was like, what about the other one? And so Taylor did enter TrialNet, and she was screened, and she was negative at the time for antibodies. So I do understand that she probably needs to be screened again, and again in high school, to kind of have a lower chance of catching it throughout life. I think high school is the last time that they screen. As they say, I think there's 3 different times: kindergarten, maybe like middle school. Amanda, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then high school is where they like to screen the children to see if they're positive for antibodies, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. They like to try to catch it before it leaves stage 2. And then there are things on the clinical trials and other therapies now available to try to delay or prevent the onset of type 1 diabetes. So hopefully I answered your question. If not, please ask it again and we will try to answer it better next time. That's a long-winded wow. So Kyle, you can jump in about advocacy or about this question, and then I can come back in about advocacy.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say we have a 4.5-year-old who we also had tested in an early detection program. Unfortunately, so far no autoantibodies, and so I think it's great that these programs exist, especially with new drugs coming down the pipeline. I would encourage people to look out for them in their area. I think there are national programs now where you can actually have kits sent to your house. So presumably the entire United States is covered. So we definitely did that, especially with my mom and myself having type 1. We thought that was a good thing to do. I'm sorry, go ahead, Wilhelm.
Oh, no. Thanks so much, because I think we should shed some light on screening, because I think a lot of people in our predicament now didn't really know about screening until we were diagnosed. And then they're like, oh, screening is available. I definitely would have gotten Skylar screened had I known that screening was available. So I think awareness surrounding screening is very important, because prevention, I think, is always the first course of action. So I'm glad that Nancy asked that question. I did want to say a word about advocacy because we have pretty much jumped in the deep end when it comes to advocacy. And this it came about with my little teeny one diabetic child. We went to a meeting conference, and then we went to another conference, and then we met some people who had some questions and said, hey, you want to come hang out with us? And before you know it, we are advocating as a family, and we love it. Opening doors and changing the conversation, and when you see what just alone my daughter being diagnosed in the ER, in the hospital, and then coming home with Dexcom, I realized very quickly this is not the diabetes that was around 20 years ago. The management of it is so different, right? You're not like trying to dial it up. Now, those are still gold standard things to do for management, but the technology and screening and some of the agents that they have, fast acting, slow acting, fast acting, long acting, all of there's options. There are options in the type of insulin your body likes or dislikes. So I think that advocacy is important. I think that it helps to increase your knowledge. I've learned so much since I've jumped into this advocacy thing. And I think that it's for everyone. Taylor advocates. She shows up at meetings. She talks. And it's just amazing to see people have a voice for something that may indirectly affect them. So I think that advocacy, we can always use more advocates, and there's always more to say, and the conversation can just keep going on, and change does happen. It is effective.
Thank you. Yeah, Wilhelmina, if you can't tell, has joined us for some of our advocacy presentations as a guest speaker. So she is very comfortable helping us get the message across about how important advocacy is. So thank you for that. Yes, please.
Oh, I was just going to talk more about advocacy. I feel like for me, I have kind of a cheat code with advocacy just because my sister her entire career is diabetes advocacy. So I have, the big stuff available to me where it's like going to conferences or being a part of a panel like this. But I think that advocacy, I couldn't say specifically because I'm not the person with diabetes, but I think that the small level advocacy is probably what she feels more of. Like, yes, it's really nice that I'm doing this, and I will go to the conferences and whatever and talk to people, but it's kind of like the little stuff. I feel like that adds up where we're at the Taylor Swift Eras tour and she's not feeling good and the line is a gazillion people long, but it's like I run up and cut the line and say, hey, my sister has type 1 diabetes and she's low. Can I please get a Coke? I will be right back to pay for it. And for the most part, like I've done that a couple of times where I've just cut lines to get a Coke or something with sugar in it. And not once have they made me pay for it. And every single time people have been understanding. The person, behind the cash register, the people in line are like, no, please go. And so like, it can feel maybe awkward, but people are a lot like nicer and empathetic than I think we generally like to give humans credit for. And so that bit of explanation can be really helpful, or, that's an example, or even just like being with our mom who's like a nightmare and doesn't want to sit down and have like a full meal. She'd rather eat like cheese and crackers and whatever. And my sister's like, well, it's really hard to account for cheese and crackers. Like, it's easier for me to calculate a full meal. And so it's like, instead of my sister having that conversation, I'll be like, Mom, I really need a sit down meal. Like, so it's like, it's little things like that I think can just like make make a day in a hard life easier. And I think that that is what is most important to me as an advocate.
I don't know. I know we're running out of time, Amanda, but I did see there was a question about type 1 being diagnosed later in my mom's story. And that was someone who had asked that, Francina, I believe. Just real quickly, yeah, I think there are a lot more documented cases of people being diagnosed with type 1 later on in life. Indeed, for my mother's case, she was misdiagnosed with type 2 until they eventually did an autoantibody test that came back and showed that she had type 1. And the interval in that period was pretty turbulent because they couldn't find the right cocktail of meds, which she of course needed insulin since she was type 1. Maybe I'll just end on the advocacy question from my perspective, and the relationship question. I think they're tied hand in hand. For my relationship to my mom, is it's still new. We're a couple years in, and so I think we're still in that period of figuring out how this works, what's my role, what's my dynamic. And so I remain optimistic that we can have a laugh over some of these things that, that we share that are really annoying and normal in the world of diabetes. And we already are starting to have some of those conversations like, wow, did you know, this bagel is like pure carb and sends my blood sugar to 200. I had no idea. And, just little things, right? And to your point, Kaylee, I think whether it's in treatment or other, situations, social situations, those little things make a huge difference. So thank you for involving me in this panel, Deepak, and I really have all the respect in the world for you as caregivers and supporters of your people with type 1 in your family.
Yeah, thank you all so much. We went so far over, but it's fine because we needed to get all that information out. Thank you so much to our panelists and for everyone who tuned in. We are a resource. You can DM us, email us, and this will be up on YouTube and Facebook. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.